What's up, guys? I appreciate you watching my last video on this circle of control, circle of influence, and thanks for all the comments and feedback. If you haven't already, please go ahead and check that out. Today, I'm going to dive back into another coaching concept, and we're going to look specifically at the air squat. Now, why the air squat? Well, it's the most foundational movement, you could say in CrossFit, I would argue also in life. If you can't air squat, there's so many things you can't do. For example, poop, right? We all have that uncle or relative, and Thanksgiving's coming up, and year after year they get up a little bit slower until eventually you're extending a hand and helping them out of their chair. It's called decrepitude, the loss of the ability to do functional movements. We want to avoid that. The movements we do in CrossFit not only are rehabilitative, meaning if you're injured, they actually help you. How many of you started CrossFit or had a member start CrossFit with a banged up back or knee or shoulder, and then a few months into their journey, they're like, oh, I forgot that my knee was bothering. My back feels great. Yeah, these movements help you get better. And the more you need help with those movements, the more you need to do these movements. There's a concept we talk about at the Level 1 seminar, and really that's what all of this is from. Go check out the Level 1 seminar if you haven't already. But there's a concept that we call the deficiency defines the need. The deficiency defines the need. The worse someone is at these movements, the more they need to be practicing. And it's unfortunate that so many people, I don't want to say so many people, I misspoke there, that many people are afraid of CrossFit because they see the CrossFit Games when it's like, man, that's such a small percentage. 0.000, etc. 1% of the CrossFit population go to the CrossFit Games. Grandma, who sees CrossFit on TV, needs to come to the box because if she doesn't, she's not going to be squatting to the toilet eventually. Long way of getting back to the air squat. Now, I've talked about it before. I'll write it down. We think about points of performance in the air squat. We have heels, knees, depth, arch, meaning midline stabilization, and line of action. I always say arch, and people are like, oh, arch, what's that mean? This was the way I remembered the 5 points of performance when I started coaching the air squat. Heels, knees, depth, arch, line of action. My brain, it works. If you want to think of other words, great. Now, if you can remember these 5 points of performance, immediately you're going to become a better coach. Think about it from this perspective. If I walk into the box and we're coaching the air squat, or really any squat for that matter, but let's say there's no barbell involved, I know heels, where should I look? Hey, the feet, knees, where should I look? The knees, depth. Now, depth is two things. It's not only proper range of motion down, but also are people standing back up at the top. These words just represent the concepts. But when we're looking at depth, is your hip crease below the knee? Arch, midline stabilization. Are you able to withstand undue overextension and flexion of the spine? Can you maintain that natural S curvature? It helps direct your eyes. And today's concept that I really want to focus on is line of action. Here's why I want to focus on line of action today, because in a previous video I talked about the concept of static and dynamic. Static being you're held in a position. So think about the air squat. There's two static positions. There's the start and finish, which is the same thing. You're standing up tall, full extension of the hip, the knee, and the ankle joint. And then there's the bottom, the full range of motion. And when I say it's a static position, because as the coach, you can control whether your athletes stay there. So again, if we look at someone who's standing tall, I'm not the best artist, but this will do. That's me, drawn to scale, really large feet. Now, let's look at somebody at the bottom. Cool. Now, static positions. The reason I want to focus on this is because in these static positions, you can see all of this. I can see if someone's staying in their heels at the bottom. I can check their knees. Are their knees tracking their toes at the bottom? Obviously, I can check for depth, hip crease below the knee. Let me give you something to think about there while we're on it. One, if there's doubt, there's no doubt. Meaning, if I'm unsure if someone hit proper range of motion, then it's no good. I'm not saying walk around no repping people. I'm just suggesting if you're unsure, if they're riding that line, make them go a little bit deeper. And then ultimately arch or line of action. I'll give you the concept here. This spine should look the same top and bottom. Keep in mind, everyone's spine is a little bit different. There's kyphosis and scoliosis, etc. I'm only concerned with, is their spine looking the exact same at top and bottom? Point being this, if I'm calling out reps, down, stand, or down, up, squat, stand, etc., whether I'm looking at someone at the bottom or top, I can see 4 of these concepts. Or I should say, if I hold everybody at the bottom and look around the room, I can analyze these 4. The only one that I can't check out there is line of action. You have to watch for line of action in the dynamic portion of the movement. Now, what's proper line of action of the air squat, or any squat for that matter? Hips and knees bend at the same time. We send our butt back and down. The inverse of that is what we would call knee initiation. We want to avoid, let me just draw a line through that. We want to avoid knee initiation. Now, the reason I'm focusing today on line of action is because you can only see line of action in the dynamic portion. And here's what's important about that. If you're calling out reps, you have to look at one person at a time. I talked about this in my video on cross-circle cueing, but specifically for the squat, I want to look at one person at a time when I'm looking for line of action. So if I have a room of 4 or 100 people and I say down, I'm looking at one person's body. Now, line of action, it's hips and knees. And it's really their relationship to one another. What that means, if you only look at the hips, this would be hard to do, but if I only look at someone's hips, I can promise you at some point they're going to be in the right position. If I only look at the knees, at some point they're going to be in the right position at the bottom of the squat. I have to look at the relationship between the hips and knees as they descend. Let me make that clear again. As I say down, I have to look at someone's hips and knees. If we're seeing an improper line of action, oftentimes, most of the time, it's going to be knee initiation. Their knees go forward first. It's a little more risky. It's a potentially injurious position, but more importantly, we talk about the concept of posterior chain engagement. Posterior chain engagement, show muscles in the front. We're frontally fixated, but in reality, our go muscles are in the back. All positive athletic achievement comes from those posterior chain muscles, the glutes, the hamstrings, and the spinal erectors. Most likely, whatever sport you participated in prior to CrossFit, if you did, what you were trying to achieve started from the backside of their body. And I'm sure there's some exceptions, maybe running, other sports that I'm not familiar with, but growing up wrestling, I never thought of this. My wrestling coach, shout out to Coach Ortega, my 9th grade earth science teacher, he never said, hey Jay, when you shoot a double leg, I need you to think about, activating your glutes, your hamstrings, and your spinal erectors. But when I was in that, set up position and I shot in for a power double, it was my butt doing the work. So we want to send our hips back and down in order to recruit those big, strong muscles. I wouldn't say typically, but oftentimes in the air squat, this goes pretty well. You might see some slight knee initiation where you really see this concept being exploited, and people that have a really nice air squat can then have a pretty nasty front squat or overhead squat, is because once you add a barbell to the equation, whether it's in the front rack position or, let's put it here, overhead, we know that we need this bar in line with the frontal plane, over the middle of our body. But for many people, whether they have tight shoulders or other aspects of their body are tight, they struggle with that. So in order to compensate, they shoot their knees forward to keep their torso a bit more upright, which then keeps the bar over the middle of their body. Super inefficient. And ultimately, they need to settle into this position at the bottom anyway, or they're going to wind up on their toes. So we talk about the air squat, which then leads to the front squat, and then the overhead squat. It's like a magnifying glass. If I look at someone's air squat, it's like I'm looking at it with just naked eyes. Now, if I look at someone's front squat, it's as if I'm zooming in on a microscope maybe 10 times, right? I'm seeing some of these faults present themselves. As soon as you add a barbell overhead, the overhead squat, it's like zooming in 1,000 times. I'm going to see all of these inefficiencies and faults that they're making. But the truth is, most likely, it goes back to the air squat. So take time and work on that air squat. And my challenge for you after watching this video is really focus on line of action this week. Really, next time you coach the squat, look for that knee initiation. Make sure people are sending their hips back and down. And I'll give you a few coaching concepts to think about. You can simply slow them down, right? Like give me a quarter of a squat. Okay, let's finish that repetition. My favorite, I'll give you this, take it. I beg, borrow, and steal from better coaches, and I'm sure I stole this from somebody else. Steal it from me. You go grocery shopping. I'll end with this story. We all go grocery shopping. Now, you guys that are watching this, I challenge you, whether you live in Colorado, Florida, or anywhere around the world, we go grocery shopping. You got kids, you got dogs, you got 7 bags of groceries. How many trips are you going to take from the car to the front door? Think about it. The answer is 1. We all load up those groceries, right? We got Madison tucked into her arm. I got Rocky following behind. And I'm like, oh no, I left the car door open. How do I shut that car door? Boom. Butt back. It's a quarter squat. Shut that car door with your butt. Take that. Use it to coach the movement. Keep it simple. If I hear you guys coaching, saying line of action, hip and knee moving at the same time, initiate this way, you're over your athletes' heads. Hey, Sally, shut the car door. Oh, boom. I can do that. That's how I want you to coach it this week. Hope that makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you love it, if you hate it, if you have any feedback for me, please drop it in the comments below. I'd love to check it out. Thanks a lot.